Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, taking a look at some of the biggest matchups in the Big Ten for Week 9. And we begin with Illinois traveling to go take on Washington out in Seattle. Now, Illinois had a week off to sort of reset from the season after a loss to Ohio State. But Washington, Huskies, definitely coming into this game licking some wounds after a defeat to Michigan, which the team was just able to muster 7 points in that one. So I want to start with the Washington side because it's fresh in our minds. Tom, this is a Washington offense that on paper and sort of even in performance, many times you would say this is one of the best, big threes in the Big Ten. Of course, I'm talking about quarterback DeMond Williams, running back Jonah Coleman, and wide receiver Denzel Boston. And yet, when they went up against Ohio State, they just scored 6 points, 2 field goals. When they went up against Michigan, they scored just 7 points. How do you wrestle with the potential and sometimes production of Washington's offense versus what we've seen against some of the Big Ten's best?
Well, I mean, the truth is Washington's offense has taken a nosedive in conference play compared to they were in non-conference. Now, you mentioned 2 of the teams that they played. There does matter the context of having to face Ohio State, the best team in the country, and Michigan on the road definitely impacts it. But overall, this is an offense that in non-conference play was averaging 5.28 points per possession, had a success rate of 55.2%. And in conference play, that's dropped to 1.88 points per possession and a 45.9% success rate. They have had some serious issues moving the ball, and that includes the Rutgers game, in which Rutgers can't stop anybody. So Washington was able to move the ball in there, but it's just the other games have completely tanked it. So now they're going to be facing this Illini team at home in desperate need of having to bounce back to keep their hopes both in the Big Ten and for the college football playoff alive. But another problem that they're facing is last week against Michigan, this team got healthy. They got a lot of players back that had been missing. And then the Michigan game started and they lost a bunch more players. That includes their starting left tackle, Maximus McCree, who was hurt in the game and left. And Jed Fish made it sound like he will be out for the season, let alone not back to playing this week. And the backup at that position did not look good in his place and really has not looked very good at any point when he's been on the field this year. So that is a serious concern for this unit against the Illinois defense, because while they don't have an overall great pass rush, they do have an excellent pass rusher in Gabe Akis, who I can assure you will be lined up across from Washington's backup left tackle on every single snap going into this game to see if they can get to DeMond Williams and impact that offense. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Washington is able to do to overcome the injuries along their offensive line and finally get this offense back on track, because it's been disappointing in most of these games.
Tom, I think you absolutely nailed it there. I think Jed Fish does a great job of scheming stuff up for quarterback DeMond Williams and the trio, obviously, with the receiver and the back. But one of the concerns we had about this team coming out of preseason camp was the depth along the lines of scrimmage on really, both sides of it. And I feel like if you're not able to consistently block it up, a lot of the window dressing stuff that Fish is going to scheme up, the defense just doesn't have to fall for it as much because they're winning at the line of scrimmage. They held Washington to an incredibly low, rushing success rate. DeMond Williams throws those back-to-back picks that were pretty crippling there to start the third quarter. And Michigan, once they have the lead, they're just going to put you in a headlock and not let go. So Washington's going to have to find a way to start fast against Illinois. I don't like this team playing from behind. I do have some serious line of scrimmage concerns for them. They had some, bad preseason injuries as well, like we just talked about. They also lost their tight end in that game. He was carted off. So left tackle out, tight end, I would say if you're carted off, probably unlikely to make an impact in this one. They're going to have to find like some real magic there with the scheme to try to get some guys open against this Illinois team.
Yeah, but, we might have a chance to hit on Michigan a little bit, or at least Michigan State, the quarterback that they're playing. But as I went back to really dig into this one, those turnovers were just backbreakers. It wasn't even like Michigan brought the hammer and totally like obliterated Washington in that game. Washington just put themselves into a point where, to your great words, you said you've got a little bit of a chokehold. Okay, but what about the team on the other side? Bud Elliott, I've got an idea about what Tom Fornelli might think, considering what we saw in the A block or last week or the week before that. But does Illinois have the goods? Because going into Husky Stadium is a difficult task, and being able to come out with the win would be something that I think would rejuvenate this Illinois team for the final stretch of the season. Do you feel confident that Illinois, as an underdog, can be able to go in and pull off the upset?
I give them an excellent chance to go in there and pull the upset. I think they're healthier than this Washington team is. In looking at this, I think they're both really well coached team, obviously, who are like these are good football teams who are just a bit imperfect. If you look at what happened to Illinois, Indiana's a really good football team, right? And down the stretch in that game, there were points, I believe, in which Illinois was missing, I think, 4 or 5 of their starters in the secondary. That's going to be a bit of an issue in that game, and they're just not quite as good as Indiana is this year. Their other loss to Ohio State, like nobody's really challenged Ohio State this year. That team has just been completely dominant. Probably the only team in the country that has been pretty dominant, at least defensively, in every game that they've played. So, when I take a look at this, I think that unless you can really beat up Illinois along lines of scrimmage, or if you can just somehow get all their secondary starters to be out in the game, this is a tough football team to beat. You have a very veteran quarterback in Luke Altmaier. Maybe their weapons at receiver this year are not quite as good as they were last year, but they spread the ball around decent. I know they want to get back to the run game after seeing Michigan last week. Jordan Marshall, I believe, a career high in rushing yards, 133 for him. So I would expect Illinois to probably be pretty effective moving the football here on a Washington defense that hasn't been quite as good, this year as maybe it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, when I look at this matchup, it's the things that concern me is, the last time Illinois went on the road and played in a more difficult environment against a good team was that Indiana game. And, well, they lost by 53 points. And as Bud mentioned, the injuries on the defensive side of the ball had a lot to do in the final margin. But the fact of the matter was Indiana was the better football team in that game and would have smoked them either way. But this is still a team that outside of those Ohio State and Indiana losses has been a good football team. It hasn't been an elite team, but they've beaten everybody else that they've played, and they've played well. And this is a Washington team, to me, that, as we've discussed, it's banged up on offense. Defensively, it has struggled. Now, getting those players back last week, like Caleb Durfee in their pass rush, I think helped them and will help them here, because if there is one weakness that I do feel like Illinois has, they've been one of the better passing offenses in the country. They are much more of a passing team than they are a rushing team. They're far more effective at it. But Luke Altmaier still does take a lot of sacks. And this is a situation where if you're on the road in Husky Stadium, which is going to be very loud, if there are any communication issues at the line of scrimmage in the pre-snap, and maybe you misidentify some blitzes and who's coming, much like you did in that game against Indiana, Luke Altmaier could find himself under a lot of pressure, taking hits, putting themselves behind the chains. And this is an offense that I think can survive that. It's just hard to do that consistently when you're on the road facing a pretty good team. So I think that's going to be the key for Illinois. Can they avoid those pre-snap mistakes? Can they avoid the false starts to put him in the hole? And can they keep Luke Altmaier on his feet for him to make the throws? Because when he gets the time, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the country. It's just when he doesn't, things go a little haywire.
Hank Beatty game? We're going to get a Hank Beatty game, Tom?
Ooh. I would expect Hank Beatty to have a game. I would expect Colin Dixon to have a game, and hopefully they can get Khalil Valentine going in the run game, because he's been coming on for them, taking more of a load share as far as carries go, and he's been very effective, and I think he's kind of starting to take over that role.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. None of us mentioned Washington in terms of college football playoff, but at least when I view these teams, like Bud was saying earlier, these are very good teams, all occupying somewhat of the similar realm, the similar tier in the Big Ten. Should be a very fun one out in Seattle. Of course, Illinois back in the top 25. They are trying to defend that status in Husky Stadium.